I didn't think much of it at first. Just another long day, another drive down that cracked county road, dust kicking up behind my truck like it always does, same quiet stretch of land my grandfather refused to sell back when everyone else cashed out and ran, and then I saw it. 3 black garbage bags, torn at the seams, something leaking out onto the dirt. A busted lawn chair flipped sideways like it had been tossed out of a moving truck. And right in the middle of it all, a bright white sign staked into my soil like a flag of conquest. Temporary Community Refuse Collection Point. Temporary. Yeah, that word hit me funny. Because nothing about this felt temporary. It felt deliberate. Personal, even. See, my place sits just outside a gated neighborhood called Silver Creek Estates. Manicured lawns, brick entrances, those little decorative mailboxes that all match like they were stamped out of the same catalog, and I am not part of that world. Never have been. My acre of land. It's an island. My grandfather held on to it when the developers came knocking decades ago. Told them he'd rather deal with wild animals than paperwork and committees. Guess he knew something I didn't. Because standing there, looking at their trash bleeding into my dirt, I realized they had finally decided to deal with me. Or rather, use me. I stood there a while, just taking it in, the smell, the audacity, the fact that someone had walked onto my property, planted a sign like they owned it, and left their mess behind like I was some kind of overflow bin. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I called the number listed on the sign. HOA office. A woman answered, voice smooth, practiced, the kind that sounds like it's used to getting its way. I told her what I was looking at, gave her my address. And there was this pause on the line. Not confusion, not concern, just calculation. Then she goes, oh yes, that's part of our neighborhood cleanup initiative. We'll have it removed within the week. Within the week. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, that's not your property. She didn't even miss a beat. It's just temporary. It won't be an issue. That right there, that was the moment. Not the trash, not the sign, the tone, that quiet, dismissive certainty that I didn't matter, that I'd just tolerate it. I told her I wanted it gone today. She chuckled. Actually chuckled. Sir, it's just garbage. And then she hung up. Just like that. Click. I stood there holding my phone, staring out at those bags like they were daring me to do something about it. And here's the thing about people like that. They don't expect resistance. They expect compliance. They expect you to shrug, maybe grumble a little, then move on. But I didn't move on. I remembered something instead. My cousin Caleb runs a small organic farm about 10 miles out. Good guy, works hard, grows everything the old-fashioned way. No shortcuts, no chemicals. But he does have one thing. One very powerful thing. Liquid manure. And not the mild kind either. I'm talking about the kind of smell that doesn't just hit your nose, it settles into your soul. The kind that makes you question your life choices. So the next morning, I drove out there. Didn't say much when I got there. Just told him I needed a favor. He looked at me for a second, then smiled like he already knew this wasn't about farming. We loaded up a 55-gallon drum into the back of my truck, strapped it down tight, and I headed back home. The whole drive, I kept thinking about that laugh, that it's just garbage line. Funny how something small like that can flip a switch in your brain. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, calm even. I rolled that drum out, slow and steady, right up to the edge of my property line. Not an inch over, not a single inch. Directly across from their pristine little entrance, their flowers, their neatly trimmed hedges, their pride and joy. And then, I opened the drum. The smell hit instantly. Sharp, thick, alive. I tipped it forward and started pouring, a long, even line stretching across the boundary like I was drawing a line in the sand. No rush, no hesitation, just steady, deliberate movement. When I finished, I grabbed my rake, and this part mattered. I didn't just leave it sitting there. I worked it into the soil, turned it over, mixed it in, made sure it had time to breathe, to activate. Because if they were going to treat my land like a dumping ground, I figured I'd return the favor, just in a way they couldn't ignore. And then I waited. Not long, maybe a couple hours. The breeze picked up around mid-afternoon, drifting right towards Silver Creek Estates like it had somewhere important to be. And that's when it started. Slow at first, subtle, then heavier, thicker, impossible to miss. The kind of smell that creeps in through open windows, wraps itself around your furniture, your clothes, your dinner table, the kind that doesn't ask permission. By evening, it owned the place. And I knew they were about to notice. Now let me pause the story right there for a second, because what happened next only really makes sense if you understand the rules these HOA types think they're playing by. See, according to standard procedure, a homeowners association only has authority within its defined boundaries, meaning if your property isn't legally part of that HOA, they don't get to regulate it, use it, or touch it, period. What they can do, though, is rely on pressure, social pressure, perceived authority, and honestly, intimidation. That's where people get tripped up. From a legal perspective, what they did by dumping trash on my land and placing signage without permission, that edges into trespassing and illegal dumping territory. Not just rude, but potentially actionable. But here's the catch. Most people don't push back. And they know it. This is a psychological trap. They act confident. They use official language. They behave like they have jurisdiction even when they don't. And a lot of folks just assume, well, they must be allowed to do this. That's how they win. Not with law, but with assumption. And I'll be honest, part of me knew all that in the moment. But I also knew something else. Going the slow, legal route, filing complaints, waiting weeks, dealing with paperwork, that wouldn't fix the immediate problem sitting on my land. So instead, I chose leverage. Something fast. Something undeniable. Because the reality is, when people ignore your boundaries, sometimes the only way to make them listen is to make the consequences impossible to ignore. By late afternoon, I didn't need binoculars. I didn't need a phone call. I could feel it in the air, that shift. You ever notice how a neighborhood has a rhythm? Kids outside, dogs barking, someone mowing their lawn. Yeah, that rhythm. Gone. Replaced by something else. Windows slamming shut. Screen doors banging. People stepping outside for half a second, then immediately retreating like they touched a hot stove. And I just leaned on my rake, standing there at the edge of my property, watching it all unfold like a slow-motion domino effect. It didn't take long before the first car rolled up my driveway. Black SUV, polished to perfection, tires still clean like they'd never seen real dirt. Out steps the HOA president, except this time, she didn't have that calm, polished tone. No, this was different. Sunglasses on, but you could tell from the way she moved, sharp, irritated, waving one hand in front of her face like she was trying to physically push the smell away. She was not having a good day. What is that smell? She snapped before she even made it halfway up the driveway. No greeting, no introduction, just straight to outrage. I didn't move much, just shifted my weight a little, rested both hands on the rake handle like I had all the time in the world. Fertilizer, I said. Simple, clean, honest. She stopped dead in her tracks. This is unacceptable. I nodded slowly, like I was really considering that. Yeah, smells pretty bad, doesn't it? That didn't help. Not even a little. She took a few more steps forward, then stopped again, probably realizing every step closer made it worse. You need to remove this immediately. And that right there, that word, need. Like she still thought she had authority over me. I almost smiled. I'm prepping my soil for spring planting, I said, calm as ever. Perfectly legal. She crossed her arms, shifting her weight like she was recalibrating. We'll be contacting the county. I gave a small shrug. You should. And just like that stalemate, she stood there another second, maybe expecting me to crack, to apologize, to back down, but I didn't. So she turned, quick and stiff, and walked back to her SUV. Not fast enough to look like she was fleeing, but definitely not slow enough to pretend she was comfortable. The next day, things escalated. You could almost track the spread of panic like weather patterns. People posting online, group chats lighting up, neighbors talking across fences, and by midday, the county inspector showed up. Old pickup, faded logo on the door, guy looked like he'd seen everything twice already. He stepped out, took about 3 steps toward the property line, and then paused. Just stood there, took a breath in, then out, and then, I swear, he chuckled. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, knowing chuckle like, yep, I see what's going on here. He walked over, asked me a couple basic questions, glanced at the boundary markers, then turned toward the HOA president who had conveniently appeared again, this time keeping a little more distance. She launched into it immediately, complaints, accusations, the whole performance. He listened, nodded, then said, "Ma'am, he's within his rights. This is agricultural use on private property. There's no violation here. You could feel the air shift again, not from the smell this time, but from that realization hitting her. She didn't argue much after that, just kind of deflated, like someone had let the air out of whatever authority she thought she had. Turned around and walked back to her car, one hand still covering her nose, dignity hanging on by a thread. But here's where it got interesting, because instead of ending there, it got louder. Day 2, the smell didn't fade. It settled in, deep, persistent, the kind of thing that doesn't just go away overnight. I made sure of that. Early that morning, I went back out with the drum, added just enough to keep it alive. Not overkill. This wasn't about chaos, it was about control, precision, and across that fence line, absolute meltdown. I didn't even need to check, you could hear it. Raised voices, complaints drifting through the air. And yeah, I might have taken a look at their community Facebook page later that night. Big mistake, or maybe best decision I made all week. We can't eat outside. My kids are refusing to play in the yard. It smells like something died and then got worse. Someone even wrote, "This is a health hazard." That one almost made me laugh. Because suddenly, inconvenience had turned into crisis. Day 3, same routine. A little refresh. Keep the pressure steady. Not escalating, just maintaining. And that's the thing most people don't get. You don't need to go bigger. You just need to go longer. By day 5, they cracked. No announcement. No warning. Just 2 guys in reflective vests pulling up with a truck, heading straight to the pile they'd left on my land. No knocking on my door. No asking permission. Just quiet, efficient cleanup like they were hoping if they moved fast enough, this whole thing would disappear. I walked out anyway. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just present. Watching. They avoided eye contact, worked quickly, loaded everything up, and within maybe 20 minutes, it was gone. My land, clean again. The way it should have been from the start. But I didn't say a word to them. Because the trash wasn't the point anymore. The behavior was. The pattern. And I wasn't about to let that reset without terms. The next morning, she came back. Different energy this time. No dramatic entrance. No raised voice. Just a controlled walk up the driveway, holding a manila folder like it weighed more than it should. She stopped a few feet away, not too close, and gave a tight, practiced smile. "We'd like to resolve this," she said. I nodded once. Good. She opened the folder, pulled out a document, and explained it. They'd cover full restoration of the affected area, clean up, reseed, whatever was needed, plus a small compensation fee for the inconvenience. $10. 10. I actually blinked at that. Not because I was offended, but because it told me everything I needed to know. They still didn't get it. Still thought this was about money. I shook my head slowly. Not enough. Her smile tightened. What exactly are you asking for? I took a step forward. Not aggressive, just enough to make sure she understood I wasn't negotiating from a weak position. I want it in writing, I said. That you and your HOA will never step foot on my property again without permission. No dumping. No signs. Nothing. She opened her mouth to respond, but I kept going. And if you do, slight pause, you owe me $50,000 per day until it's removed. Silence. Just the wind. And yeah, still a little bit of that smell hanging in the air like a reminder. She looked down at the paper, then back at me, weighing it, calculating. And here's the thing, she knew. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Because I hadn't bluffed once this entire time. She hesitated maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then she signed it. No argument. No speech. Just a quick, decisive signature like ripping off a bandage. And just like that, it was done. That evening, I went back out with the hose, diluted the strip, broke it down, let the soil breathe again. By the next day, the smell was fading. By the day after that, gone. Quiet returned. Windows opened. Life resumed. And me? I went back to my routine. Same land, same road, same quiet. Only difference now was the boundary. Clear, respected, and written in ink. Now here's the part people always want to skip to. The who won moment, the satisfaction, the clean ending where the bad guy gets humbled and everything goes back to normal. But honestly, that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is why this worked. Because it wasn't about the smell. Not really. The smell was just a tool. The real story here is about boundaries and what happens when someone decides yours don't matter. See, the lesson here is most conflicts like this don't start with something big. They start with something small that gets ignored. A little overstep. A temporary decision. A casual assumption that you won't push back. And if you let that slide, that becomes the new normal. That's how people, and especially organizations like HOAs, expand their control. Not through force, but through repetition, through testing limits, through seeing what they can get away with. And if you're someone who values peace, who doesn't want confrontation, who thinks it's not worth the trouble, you're exactly the kind of person they expect. And that's not an insult, that's just reality. But here's where it shifts. Because once you recognize that pattern, you start to see the game differently. From a legal perspective, I could have gone the traditional route, file complaints, document everything, maybe even hire a lawyer, drag it out for weeks or months. And yeah, I probably would have won eventually. But the damage? The stress? The time? That's the cost nobody talks about. What I chose instead was leverage. Immediate, visible, undeniable leverage. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying everyone should go out and escalate situations like this. That can backfire real quick if you don't understand the rules. But I am saying this. You need to know where you stand. You need to know your rights, your property lines, your local regulations, because once you do, you're not guessing anymore. You're operating with intent. And that changes everything. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. They assume the other side has more power than they actually do, just because they sound official, just because they speak confidently, just because they represent a group. But confidence isn't authority, and titles don't override the law. Once that illusion breaks, the entire dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they're the ones reacting. They're the ones adjusting. They're the ones trying to regain control. And that's exactly what happened here. The moment the HOA realized they couldn't pressure me, couldn't outweight me, couldn't outmaneuver me legally, they folded. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And that brings me to the last piece of this, restraint. Because I could have kept it going. I had the drum. I had the position. I had the advantage. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't to win forever. It's to reset the balance. Once that contract was signed, once the boundary was respected, once the message was clear, I stopped. Immediately. No dragging it out. No extra punishment. Because at that point, continuing wouldn't be strategy, it would be ego. And ego is how you turn a win into a problem. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Know your boundaries, understand your leverage, and don't wait for someone else to respect you before you decide to enforce it yourself. And I'm curious, what would you have done in that situation? Would you go the legal route? Would you confront them directly? Or would you find your own creative solution? Drop it in the comments. I read more of those than you'd think. And if you want more stories like this, real situations, real conflicts, real lessons buried inside them, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because trust me, this kind of thing, it happens a lot more than people realize.